Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Jenny Whitener and I'm the CEO of Bridge Innovate, and we are thrilled to have you join us today for an exciting inspirational webinar, Designers in Sustainability. We've got two great guests with us today that I'll be introducing momentarily that'll be taking us through the highlights of an extraordinary conference that just happened about a week ago. So we are excited to have you join us today. So again, I'm Jenny Whitener with Bridge Innovate. We are a global network of business strategists, consultants, and leaders who work alongside your team to create defining moments for your organization. We're thrilled to have the opportunity to engage with a number of different global companies around the world and nonprofits. So we're welcoming you into our community today. We continue on. Today's speakers are just smashing. They're great. So we have with us Robert Grace, who is the founder and president of RL Grace LLC, a consulting and communications company, and also Stephan Clambaneva. Thank you, Stephan. Joining us today is a board member with the Industrial Designer Society of America and also founder of the Ideators. And so they'll be sharing with us today a reflection on the conference, the most recent conference from IDSA. So we're excited to have them here. Bob, you would want to share a little bit more about your background, and I'll ask Stephan to do the same.
Sure, thank you. Well, first of all, I'm a journalist and I'm not a designer. And so what drew me to the design sector initially, it was probably about 2004 when I attended my first IDSA International Conference and became a member. Back then I was editor of Plastics News, and I discovered what a fun and creative group of people it was, and one largely focused on improving the human condition. So that resonated with me because as a journalist covering the plastics manufacturing industry, I was very involved with covering the topics of waste and recycling for a long time. And so it's an important area, and I kind of took it upon myself to try to be a bridge builder between the plastics manufacturing community and the design community. And so organized a number of conferences along that line. Some of them focused on sustainability and others not. But that kind of led me to where we are today.
Great. Thank you, Bob. And Stephan, share with the audience a bit more about your background.
Certainly. Well, thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Bob. It's great to be here today. Again, my name is Stephan Clambaneva. I consider myself a design hybrid. So a systems thinking designer, ideator, inventor, and I use the Greek letter pi to describe sort of what kind of a designer I am. IDEO coined the term T-shaped person. I kind of use the Greek letter pi to point out the fact that I have sort of two legs, one in business, one in design, one in engineering, depending on who I'm talking to. So, left brain meets right brain, design and business, and design and entrepreneurship. So I've been elected and served on the board of Industrial Designers Society of America or have been a chapter chair since 2010. So it's over 10 years now. I serve on numerous advisory boards for startups. I'm on the steering committee for New York Design Week, NYC by Design, and I'm a mentor for 3 global accelerators. So I have 20 years of experience with the tech giants IBM, the enterprise software leader Dassault Systems, and I've been doing experience design and innovation projects for clients globally. So I'm excited to be here and share kind of what we did at the conference last week.
Great. Well, let's get going. So I want to also just sort of start with an overview of our agenda. Today, we're going to hear from Bob and Stephan about the role of the designer and their mindset, sort of key insights there. We'll talk about how a crisis inspires design and sustainability, and then spend most of our time today reflecting on the sustainability conference that was just held and do a deep dive on some of the highlights of that particular conference. And then, of course, I think Bob and Stephan might charter us to be thinking a bit differently as we go forward after today's session. So let's continue on. I want to give an opportunity to you guys to share in the chat, what are the most significant attributes of a great designer? So if you could share in the chat your perspective on this question, What are the most significant attributes of a great designer? And let's see what you have to say. Okay, empathetic. Thank you, Lindsay. And I think that has a lot to do with listening. Curiosity, absolutely. What other types of attributes? Problem solver. Absolutely, that's where we're focused on solving those critical problems. Other comments about the most significant attribute of a great designer, problem solver coming in. Again, yeah. No preconceived notions, right? So get rid of the bias. Adaptability, very good. Other comments. New opportunities, being able to seize new opportunities and seek new opportunities. Okay, very good. Well, thank you. Solution builder. Don't see a problem, you see a solution. that proactive, you're sort of very affirmative focus. Creative surprise, I love that. Thank you so much. All right, so wonderful attributes coming in around the focus of designers today and the challenges that we face in helping to solve today's problems. Let's continue on. The designer's role and the mindset. Bob and Stephan, give us some perspective here from the input that you've seen from the participants today. Any comments that you would share about the designer's role and mindset?
Well,
Bob, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll take a lead here. I think there's long been a tension amongst designers, and that they typically work for clients whose work pays their bills, and yet for a long time, and in most cases, those clients tended to be focused primarily on making products that would sell, regardless of their impact on the environment. So the more widgets, the merrier, as long as they prove to be profitable. I think over time, we've seen that pendulum swing as more and more companies and the individuals realize that there's only one Earth and there is no planet B, as they say. And so now more now recognize that we had better start paying attention to the use of our finite natural resources and to the quality of the air and our ocean, and so much more. And yet, designers have been relegated in some cases to sort of a back seat in some arenas. You know, I know from my plastics manufacturing experience, since designers didn't tend to buy railroad cars full of resin or lots of expensive molding machines, that they weren't on the A list of people to engage with and enlist amongst some of the folks that we served with our writing. And whereas engineers typically prefer to play it safe and follow proven procedures, designers, in my experience, tend to ask why not and push the envelope. So I think that attitude is more necessary now than ever, especially with what we've seen with COVID. Stephan?
Yeah, great points, Bob. One of the things that I would add is that there's been an evolution. So I would say 2015 is a special year for design. You could argue that sort of we graduated to the big boys table. Now, if you look at HBR, they put Harvard Business Review, for those that don't understand the acronym. 2015 was a pivotal year because design was at the front of the cover, one of their publications. You know, it looked like it was writing, and it looked like you know, the outline of Steve Jobs, right? And then the same year, in fact, the Bloomberg had a whole issue focused on just design. And so this, for those that didn't have creatives at the board level, this was sort of a wake-up call for, you know, a lot of companies saying, hey, what about these folks in design? Should we be giving them, you know, opportunity to kind of voice their opinions? And so I think that it's been an opportunity that a lot of designers and creatives have really taken upon themselves to step up really visibly. You know, there's a number of different folks out there that you can really point to. The chief creative officer of PepsiCo being one, and you know, a number of organizations have really pushed designers to kind of come to the table. And I think that's important to kind of allow us to really have an impact at scale that's really necessary.
Great points. In fact, we see the same. Design influencing business strategy, market positioning, solving complex problems. I agree with both of you that designers and their creativity are at the forefront of solving all of our future challenges. So let's continue on. One of the questions that I wanted to ask the audience today participating with us is, think about sustainability. If you think about the role of designers and sustainability, how has COVID-19 contributed to increased waste? Have you seen that in your community? What have you seen in your organization? How has COVID-19 contributed to increased waste? If you could use the chat and share with us your perspective for us to get an understanding of how sustainability is being impacted with the current pandemic. Any comments from our audience?
I think
We got bunches of masks, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
and there are many of them are not reusable. An increase in disposables. Any other comments around how COVID-19 has contributed to increased waste? Delivery services with tons of disposable plastics and packages. More online shopping, seeing a lot of deliveries. So you've got all that packaging, lots of litter in the fields nearby, bottles, cans, masks, things that are being disposed of constantly with the pandemic. Gloves and bottles, high degrees of gloves and bottles being disposed. Takeout food containers, absolutely many, many more uses of takeout food containers for people who are not going into restaurants, particularly, and taking that home. Very good. Thank you so much for that. Let's continue on. So I think how a crisis inspires design and sustainability. This is, I think, a big shift of what the focus of the conference was that you guys were a part of attending and leading. So I think I'll turn it over to Bob and Stephan here to kind of walk us into the content of today's session around how design and sustainability is addressing the crisis today and the role that they're seeing that play.
In regards to the COVID crisis, I think we've seen an incredible burst of innovation and creativity in response to the needs of that are generated by this pandemic. Designers and manufacturers and others have leapt into action to repurpose materials and production machinery to make the personal protective equipment, the PPE, needed by frontline healthcare workers and others. And it's been really inspiring. There was a pair of designers in Northern Italy who reversed engineered a vital part for a ventilator, 3D printed it out of plastic and delivered it to local hospitals who had run out of those parts. One report I read estimated their efforts had saved 10 lives. As an aside, the original producer of that ventilator has sued the pair for patent infringement, and I'd say good luck winning that case in front of a jury. But in any case, I think that's just one example, and we've all seen dozens of them or scores of them in the last couple months of how people are rising to the occasion. On the waste topic, I think the COVID has also, it's prompted the rolling back of a lot of single-use plastic bans, whether it's in takeout containers or single-use retail bags that are either in place or scheduled to go into place because people have found that disposable items in this environment are safer than reusable. And there is a concern that this might help serve to reverse some of the gains in the environmental efforts to do away with some of these or find alternatives. I think that remains to be seen, but right now the focus is on saving lives. Stephan?
Yeah, well, that's spot on, Bob. When we started putting together this conference, we didn't know that this was going to hit us. We've been working on this for over a year, sort of in the early planning stages. But when we made the decision in March to move to a virtual event, here I was, stuck at home, and my thoughts sort of started to kind of coalesce into this inspirational kind of drive that I really wanted to get talking about. And I used this during my my kickoff for the conference, and I think it's relevant in this conversation as well. So when we're stuck at home to mitigate the impact of COVID-19, it had me thinking of the last time we had a major economic recession or a challenge globally. And it took me back to the 2008 New York Times essay by Michael Cannell, which is called "Design Loves a Depression." So you guys can look it up for those of you that are on our webinar today. You can look it up and read it yourselves. But besides that, the other thing that really started kind of coming together was the recent 50th anniversary of Earth Day. So I was thinking of design loves the depression and planet Earth. And this global pandemic was urging me to define what designers need to do for sustainability and climate change. There's a lot of articles out there that argue how interconnected these crises are, and even the fact that climate change could just be described as a slow-moving pandemic. So we need to make a change through innovation, human-centered design, and problem solving with holistic systems thinking. We got to look, outside the box in a sense. So, how can we do that? Well, I mean, here in New York City, we still clap every day at 7 o'clock for our doctors. So the question is, why don't, instead of just clapping for them, why don't we try and emulate them? The doctors subscribe to the ethical canon of first do no harm. And in fact, Bob here referenced this in an article that he also wrote fairly recently. And this stems from the Hippocratic Oath in ancient Greece over 2,000 years ago. How about designers? These kinds of principles can drive sustainability and circularity by design. So in light of the current pandemic, I think we can't afford to really take one step forward and 20 steps back like we did after 9/11 or the financial crisis of 2008. Why can't we just adopt the Hippocratic Oath and make beautiful things, but do no harm? If we take on this challenge, no matter what you make, where you do it and who you do it for, then you'll be able to really make an impact. So, my point is stay safe and just do no harm by design.
I think that's fantastic. So I know that we're launching now into some deep dive areas of the conference. Maybe, Mary, we go on to the next slide. We can understand a little bit about what the focus of the conference was. And then I know you guys are both going to highlight a couple of the speaker segments.
Yeah, well, sure. I'll summarize these a little bit fairly quickly, but without getting into all the details, because you can read a lot of this stuff directly on the website, idsa.org. The point that I wanted to sort of, when we started thinking about this, it actually goes all the way back to 10 years ago. When I was a chapter chair, elected chapter chair for New York City, we and my closest team, we wanted to put together a conference on design and sustainability. And so through what we were dealing with at the time, it didn't really come to fruition back then. So it's been on my bucket list. That's how far back it goes. So a year ago, when Jason Belair, who's the incoming president for IDSA, kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, that thing that you've been trying to do, I think we should do it. It's a good time. And I couldn't agree with him more. I jumped on this. So I'm like, okay, if we're going to do this, what we need to do is make sure we don't do this one-off thing, but we start to do things thinking of long term. So we want to build these long arcs that people can really build upon for the years to come. So that's why we looked at these 3 different themes. So these are sort of long, broad terms where we could start to build out content, starting with our inaugural deep dive that happened last week, and sort of continue things on until hopefully there comes a point where a sustainability conference is irrelevant. Wouldn't it be nice if everybody's doing sustainability? So it's like, well, what's the point of doing a conference on the topic? Because it's like, whatever, everybody's doing it. So with that in mind, we kind of broke it out into these 3 themes. One was sustainable strategy. So you can imagine here, it's, what does design for circularity mean? What can designers do to have an impact on the UN global SDGs, right? The 17 SDGs. What are the impact of directives such as REACH, ROHAS, WE, ELV, and all these other standards have on design, and the impact that they should be driven, sort of, and what the responsibilities of designers should have. So that's sort of strategy. And then you think about processes. Well, when I looked at process, I thought of it, well, it's an overarching umbrella term that you can have materiality. So what kind of materials, new materials that are more sustainable, bioplastics or plastics that can break down after a year. What kind of tools, whether they're actual design tools that have best practices built into the system, such as what AutoCAD and some of the other big manufacturer design and CAD tools are developing. And so, processes and tools and materials. And then the third day is, let's look at something that's really pretty, but at the same time has been able to showcase a true sustainable product or experience. And that's what we mean by that third theme there, sustainable product and experience. So can we have a case study that we can showcase some of these best practices that actually have come to fruition in a product? And how does that product sort of be the poster child for what it really means to be sustainable or circular today? That was the idea.
Good. Let's keep going.
Well, I can vouch for the fact, having attended all 3 days last week, that they did a great job with this. And we wanted to highlight just a few of the speakers and sessions. The well-known global design consultancy IDEO hosted a 1-hour breakout session, and this group has long been one of the leaders in this space and has worked collaboratively with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation.
Bob, can you speak up just a little bit? They're having a little difficult time hearing you.
I'm sorry. They've worked with Ellen MacArthur to help develop circular design guides, among other initiatives. IDEO Chairman Tim Brown has been quoted as saying, "If you adopt a holistic view of production, take advantage of idle capacity, reuse materials, and increase the lifespan of products, you will save both money and the planet." And that's the promise of circular design. IDEO's Rebecca Chesney told deep dive attendees last week that how IDEO activates ecosystems of stakeholders to pool risk and resources and collaboratively explore challenges that are too large for any one organization to tackle alone. And she said, "We see a bigger role for designers to play in this." And I think that's one of the key messages to come out of last week's sessions. The need to design not just greener products, but the need to keep the entire system in mind. For some companies, this means shifting your mindset from being a transactional supplier of a product, think for example, Philips and light bulbs, to one being a relationship-based supplier of a service. Think of Philips as a supplier of lighting and all that entails. So there's a crucial need to design collaboratively and to find a way to engage with all the key stakeholders who are in any given ecosystem, and then work to design the system, prototype it, test it. As Chesney said, we need to see the forest and the trees. Just as a very brief example, it wasn't from last week's session, but I've written about an Austrian packaging company called Normandy Group, which is striving to reimagine the flexible pouch. You know, we all as consumers have them. They're convenient, they're not breakable, they save space, they're lightweight, but they also are multi-material composite constructions, often with aluminum layer and several different plastic layers, and they are inherently unrecyclable. So Mondi worked for nearly 4 years with key stakeholders at every link in the supply chain to apply cradle-to-cradle principles to its new pouch, and it worked. The brand owner of Germany's Werner and Merz is using Mondi's fully recyclable all polyethylene pouch to package its Frosch brand detergent now. And echoing what Rebecca said at IDEO, one official in that story told me, "One company cannot do this alone anymore. You need an innovative design and a network of experts to create products for a circular economy. We have to remake everything that we make today."
Yeah, that's spot on. Well, this is a great sort of segue in, because Bob was describing a breakout session that was on day one. So focusing on the strategy side of things. The day two, it was all about processes, materials, and tools. And what I wanted to sort of highlight was something that we did that was culminated in day two with the announcement of the winners of the Eco Design Challenge, but that really had taken place for a whole month prior to this. So the idea here was to develop a design challenge that would allow the participants to kind of leverage the three key components of our conference together and develop something like a product, a real product that would illustrate the processes going through the 3 days of the conference. And so what we did here is that we developed together with Sustainable Minds, which develops life cycle assessment software, and GradCAD as the sort of a platform, a eco-design challenge called Boast Your Toast. So basically, the idea was here is to take the eco-design strategies, the circularity strategies, take the tools, so LCA tools that Sustainable Minds develops, and your design skills, and come up with a better toaster. And so this was a month-long project, a month-long challenge that you can sign up at the GradCAD challenges page. And then you could actually go and develop a new toaster. And lo and behold, it was amazing. So we had, it was the idea of redefine and position an existing appliance manufacturer or a new company that these people would imagine as a leader in high performance home appliances with environmental performance is a key component of the story. There were like 52 entries, Jenny. It was unbelievable. We had 7 jurors, and they met through 3 different Zoom sessions to select 25 entries, and then 10 finalists, and finally the 3 winners. Each were evaluated by the requirements of the challenge and everything. It was a lot of fun, and they were able to kind of piece together all the different things that we were talking about in the conference in advance. It was amazing.
That's great. Well, congratulations to you guys for
You want to go to
that. Yeah, let's keep going.
It's all about the winners, it's congratulations to the winners, but there's so much to talk about.
Okay, for next up, yeah, I'm sorry, briefly, Matrix 4 was another presenter. They had a breakout session, and they were interesting amongst this group because this is a plastics injection molder. They're a small Chicago area firm owned and run by Patricia Miller. And 5 years ago, Patricia bought a defunct factory that had been run by her grandfather and decided to remake it with a new and more sustainable mission. And so they used the hashtag Make Meaningfully, and the company has been striving to reduce its carbon footprint, cut its waste to zero, and embrace design. And in doing so, she hired Kyle Swen, a veteran San Francisco designer, and brought him on board to bring a new sensibility to Matrix 4. And the company's created a materials library that features a diverse selection of various biomaterials, which they test in production. They've created an artist in residence program where that artist works to turn Matrix's waste, such as unused resin purgings from the barrels of injection presses, into objects of art. And Patricia preaches the need to think holistically. And again, this once dark factory in Woodstock, Illinois is thriving once again and with a new and inspiring purpose.
Wow.
Keep going.
Great summary, Bob. So, we're going to end with sort of a little highlight of day 3 from a design company out of Spain called Normandy. So Jillian Trummer and Blake really did a great job in sort of inspiring us through beautiful design. So they're very successful. Normandy is a very successful design consultancy. I know Jaime Moreno personally, is a dear friend, and they were really focusing on illustrating the power of design to create a better future, right? I can't really go into all the wonderful things that they talked about, but they kind of paraphrased the people, planet, profit phrase by saying doing good and doing well must go together. They kind of started with a snapshot of the current reality of what we're dealing with. So showing some sort of challenging times, whether it's the wildfires in Australia or the current environmental challenges we have with pollution, but kind of really quickly turned it into a positive and an inspiring message. In fact, I'll just point to like a lot of designers over the last 3 days quoted Buckminster Fuller as well. And then they state that if success or failure of this planet and of human beings is dependent on how I am and what I do, how would I be? What would I do? So I'll just leave it at that, because there's just it's a great inspiring message, sort of self-inflection from Buckminster Fuller.
That's an amazing challenge. It makes us be more thoughtful and inspire us to be more intentional. So thank you. I know that we are at time today for our session. I want to thank Bob and Stephan for sharing the highlights of an amazing conference. If you do have questions for them and the follow-up materials, you'll get their emails and you can follow up with them directly. We're so fortunate to have you here with us today and share some insights with our audience. We have a number of upcoming other webinars. Feel free to join us. They're all free, giving inspiring leaders like all of you an opportunity to share your perspective with others around the world. So thank you, Bob and Stephan, again, for an amazing briefing today on the IDSA's conference on design and sustainability. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks for the opportunity, Jenny.
Jenny, Mary, Bob, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.